pray everybody is ready for Christmas, right? All the shopping's done. Man, some of y'all probably got to go out shopping tomorrow, right?
Today.
Okay, am I the only one that's not prepared yet?
No.
Spiritually, I am well prepared for it. I'm ready to go, but the physical will go buy all the presents. I'm still a little behind the 8 ball on that one.
Good luck.
Huh?
Good luck.
Yeah, well, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I want y'all to come with me on a cold Christmas Eve. The year is 1818. We're in Obendorf mountain range outside of Austria. And there's a friar there by the name of Joseph Mohr. And he's walking, or actually more trudging, down through the mountain snow pass, down to the next town where his friend Franz Gruber lives. And some of y'all probably know the name Franz Gruber. He's written some really nice classical songs. And so this friar Mohr is on his way down there with a poem that he has written. And as he's going, he's hoping that this Franz Gruber will be able to put this poem to music, because he's about 4 hours from his evening mass and he doesn't have a choral song to sing at mass yet. So he's scurrying or trudging or whatever you do in the snow down the mountain to go to Franz Gruber's house. He presents him with the poem, and Franz gives it the good once-over and says, yeah, I can come up with something. Now, Franz was also his choir director and his organist, so they already had a relationship that they knew kind of what Friar Mohr was going to want as far as the song goes. So he began to sit down and compose the song, but he then realized, well, I can't compose it for the organ because, well, there was a flood and the organ is damaged, so I'm going to write it for a guitar. So he begins to sit down and he begins to chord out this song that was going to be titled Silent Night, Holy Night. That night at Mass, as Friar Mohr and as Franz Gruber presented this song to the congregation, they could tell that people were being deeply moved by the words of the song. The people were taking the theological meaning of all of the stanzas and taking them to heart and being moved by the music. So much so that after the service, several people began to come up and tell them that that was one of the greatest songs that they had ever heard. And even today, for some of us, Silent Night, Holy Night is one of the greatest carols that we sing each and every year. It's outside of Hark, I think it's probably the second most well-known song that we sing at Christmas. Now here's the question. How much of that story is true? And how much of that story is made up or false? Well, the made up part is the part about the organ. The organ never flooded. I've never seen a mountaintop flood. Has anybody else? I've never seen a mountaintop flood. But like so many of the stories that we read in the Bible and then we tell over and over again, sometimes they get a little embellished, don't they? No, nothing different in the Christmas Day story either. That there are some parts of that might have gotten a little over-embellished. I think we've covered this, that the wise men were not there at the manger on that night. They showed up a little bit later, didn't they? So the story kind of gets condensed down and made a little bit easier. And the fact is that we have to focus on what Christmas truly is. I don't know about y'all, but like I said, I'm not looking forward to, between today and tomorrow morning, finishing up my little bit of shopping. What little bit of hair I've got left, I'm probably going to wind up pulling out because, it's the Christmas holidays. It's supposed to be the time of cheer, but for a lot of people, it is a time of great frustration. They got to deal with their families. They got to cook all the food. They got to do all these things. That there's not the peace and the joy that this holiday is supposed to bring within them. Because they're frustrated, they're stressed, they're upset that maybe they didn't get the right gift. Anybody ever done that? Bought somebody the wrong gift? Yeah. So Silent Night, Holy Night is supposed to recenter us. To bring us back to what this holiday is really truly all about. And that is one thing. The birth of the Messiah. The birth of Jesus. All of the other things of Christmas can fall away. The traditions can be done away with. As long as we hold on to the one true thing that Christmas is about. The birth of Jesus Christ. The gift that God gave this world. The gift of salvation. The gift of how to live a holy and sanctified life. The gift of how to live a life that is worth emulating and thus becoming closer to who God wants us to be. So the fiction about the Christmas story is that it's a nice romantic story. It's not. That night was not romantic. There was nothing romantic about that night, was there? They're in a stable where there's animals. There's a childbirth happening, right? What's romantic about that? It's a pretty hectic scene, isn't it? I remember I was freaking out when Sarah was having Reagan. They were moving us everywhere. They were screaming, and I didn't know what was going on. I was just told, hold on. That was it. Now imagine if that's what's going on that night. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. Maybe there's some worry because the infant mortality rate in that day was very, very high. I wonder if Joseph and Mary were frustrated, if they were angry, if there was a great, I don't want to say frustrated or angry, but there was anxiety about this coming child. Because you got to remember, they knew who the child was. They knew what lay before them. The upbringing that they would have to give God's very own Son. Wrap your head around that. A mortal parent having to teach God's own Son. Wouldn't that be a little stressful? Wouldn't that be a little stressful? Some of us think we got to be perfect and Jesus ain't in our house every day, amen? Some of us think we got to be perfect. How about these guys? Jesus literally in their house every single day. He's watching, observing, learning from them. Pretty stressful.
What about spanking?
Oh, Lord. Well, the Bible does say, spare the rod, spoil the child. The Bible is God's Word, so we'll go with, maybe he got a couple of spankings. I don't know. I'm not going that far. My theology doesn't stretch that far. Here's what somebody said in a book called One Solitary Life that I loved, and I think it summed up everything that Jesus was. It says that he was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in still another village where he worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. Then for the next 3 years, he was an itinerant preacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never had a family or owned a house. He didn't even go to a university or a college. He never visited the big city. He never even traveled more than 200 miles from the place where he was born. He did none of the things that are associated with greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He was only 33 years of age when the tide of public opinion turned against him. His friends ran away and he was turned over to his enemies and went through a mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between two thieves and his closest friends fled into the night. While he was dying, his executioners gambled for his clothing, the only property that he had ever owned on earth. When he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. And today he remains the central figure of the human race, the leader of mankind's progress. All of the armies that have ever marched, all of the knaves that have ever sailed, all of the parliaments that have ever sat, all of the kings that have ever reigned put together have not affected the life of man on this planet so much as one solitary life. That is who Jesus is. You take all of the great people of the world and you combine them together and they will still not have impacted the world as greatly as Jesus did. Well, I say did, but still does. Because we still serve the living God. He stepped right out of the grave. He said, you can't keep me down, devil. So we still serve a living God who each and every day has something designed for us to do in this life. And it is our job to step forward and do that. Now, the story of this Christmas carol is one of how God provided in the most dramatic and most amazing and most unusual way to meet a pressing need of mankind. The need for salvation. We weren't following the rules very well, were we? We were doing it really bad, or we were manipulating the rules to fit us. So God said, let me make it a little easier for you. This way you can't manipulate my word as much as you probably would like to. This way you can't make new rules that I didn't tell you to make. He said, I'm going to send you my Son on one night in a small little town of Bethlehem. A peasant woman and a humble carpenter became the earthly parents to the Most High God. They became His instructors. They became His mentors. They became His greatest lovers. The ones who would love Him deeper than anybody else could ever imagine. Their love is the love that I think we should strive towards. The love that we should aspire to when we think about Jesus. How much love should we give Him? All of it. We should not reserve any of our love for anything else, really. We should give it all to Him. That way, through Him, we may love each other in a more profound and greater way. You know, Scripture says, love God above everything else, right? And then it turns right around and says, love what? Your fellow man as you love yourselves. Some of y'all met me. I'm kind of partial to me. I love me a lot. It means I got a lot of love that I've got to give out each and every day of this life. Each and every day, I strive to live into that example of who Jesus Christ is. Surely, God has provided in an amazing and unusual way to meet that need of salvation. Who would ever think that He would send His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, to die? He was born in order that He may die. He was born to be the greatest sacrifice that mankind would ever need in this life. His whole purpose was to live as a human being and die as a human being, that through His God nature we would be set free. That's a tall order. I was talking with my wife last night. It was really interesting that this message was mulling around in my head. And my wife, just out of the blue, looked at me. And I think some of the gravity of what we're talking about seeped into her, because she turned to me with tears in her eyes and she said, I don't know if I could ever give up my baby. I don't know if I could ever give up the child that was born from my womb like Mary did. I don't know. I said, I can imagine. I don't know either. I don't know if I can let you. But what I do know is God loved us so much that He put that plan into place. Amen? He put the plan of ultimate salvation and ultimate victory over the devil in place that night. He put in a silent night, yet a holy night. He put in a night where shepherds were drawn to a little cave, a little manger area. And they sat quietly and watched as the Messiah was born. He brought angels and wise men into the life of Jesus, so that He may be molded into the man that the world would need even greater. And He gave Him the parents. Oh, they got to be the most perfect parents. You got to think about it. With the heaviest burden that mankind could probably ever imagine, these two parents did it masterfully. They raised Him to be a follower of His Father. To me, that is one of the greatest parts of the story that we hardly ever see anymore. Is that Jesus came to create a world that was worth living in and worth dying for. A couple of years ago in 1994, I think it was January the 6th, old Storm and Norman Schwarzkopf, y'all remember him, right? General Schwarzkopf and Dan Rather were doing a walkthrough of the cemetery at Normandy, the U.S. cemetery in Normandy, from the D-Day invasion. And Norman, in the midst of all of these headstones, looked around and he said, I hope that we are creating a world that is truly worth dying for. Well, Jesus did. Jesus created a world that was worth dying for. This world is called heaven, a place that you and I are given by His precious blood when we submit ourselves to His rule in our lives. We were given a place that is worth dying for, as so many people throughout history have noticed and have been a part of. Now, on to the song. All that, I hadn't even got to the song yet. Might be a little long day, huh? The song in verse 1, we learn a very specific thing about Jesus, that he was a willing sacrifice. The song starts off and speaks about heavenly peace, right? But the heavenly peace came at a price. It came that he would be a willing sacrifice. How many of y'all would be a willing sacrifice? If it meant that the world got salvation, how many of y'all would say, yep, send me, God. I'll take on it. I don't think I could. I got some things in my life that I'm happy to live for right now. Wife, a baby, hoping to have another baby at some point. I don't know if I could. It would be a very hard thing, but Jesus came willingly. You see, this was a plan that was set forth a long, long time ago, before it even came to fruition. It was a plan that God and Jesus, in this way I envision the conversation. Jesus walks up to God and goes, hey man, I got a plan. I got a plan, Dad. I can fix this whole thing. And Jesus is kind of like, oh, all right, whippersnapper, what you got? Yeah, I call Jesus whippersnapper on that. He walks up and he said, how about I go down and I show them how to live a sinless life? How about God, I go, Father, and I teach them what it means to love you and to love their fellow man? How about if I go down, Father, and I teach them what truth and light really is all about? Dad, how about if you send me? Could you imagine being the father at that point in time? When that conversation is going on and that plan is going on, can you imagine if your child ever walked up to you and said, send me to my death. Send me to the greatest torment that man probably has ever known. Send me. I want to go willingly that I may buy them their freedom once more. How would you react if your kid came up to you and said that? I'd be floored. Yeah, I'd pick up off the floor first. And then I would be scared to death. I would probably sit there and cry and shake, and I would fight against it. I would not let that happen to my child whatsoever. But God knew. He knew that that was the ultimate victory. That was the last sacrifice that was ever going to be needed. Nobody else needed live in fear anymore. Jesus was born to die. To die for you. Look at the person beside you, say he died for you. Now look at the person on this side. He died for you, behind you, in front of you. He died for you. No other reason. To claim the final victory. He was born in the most humble, probably some people would say the most peasant-like accommodations. The King of heaven laid aside all his glory, laid aside all his titles, that he might come and be the true Messiah, the last and only sacrifice that can atone for every sin in this world. And he came as a willing sacrifice. He came that he might be made whole. I remember hearing a story about a Confederate soldier that was brought before Robert E. Lee, and he was trembling and he was scared and he was afraid that was going to. And Robert E. Lee just kind of thought, he says, "That's all right, son. Don't worry. You'll receive justice here." And without missing a beat, the soldier turned and looked at him and said, "That's what I'm worried about. Is that I'm going to receive justice." You see, the justice for our sins is death and damnation. That is the gift that we should be getting for this. But God gave His Son as the greatest gift the world has ever known. On Christmas Day, He was born that He would write that passage of sin in our lives, that we would be given the opportunity to take one precious drop of His blood, apply it to our lives, and be made whole once more. One sacrifice to cover everybody for the rest of time. And this has been over 2,000 years ago for us. How many people, how much water's under that bridge? And how much more time do we have? We got to think about that. He didn't come to give us what we deserved. He came to give us this thing called grace. On that day, grace was born once more into the world. A grace that surpasses all human understanding. A grace that not a single one of us can do anything to deserve. I can't work hard enough, pray hard enough, preach long enough or hard enough to earn it. Why? Because it's a gift that was given. I didn't earn it, but it was given to me. Solely because I was willing to accept that gift of salvation. That's where grace comes into our lives, where we then begin to get this really overarching view of what our lives really truly are. How many would say today that on the day that you accepted Jesus Christ, you had a really different outlook on the world from that point on? What once was not important, or what once was important, became not important anymore to you. What was actually something that you thought was a nuisance became something that was very joyful. I don't know about y'all, but I remember early in my Christian walk, man, praying was a hindrance to me. It was a nuisance. I had to do it all the time. And as I matured, I realized how much of a pleasure the praying daily could be. How much my spirit was revived and renewed through those prayers. All because grace came in the form of a baby. All because the God took on man form. Oh, that He would know what we were suffering, what we were going through, what we were all about. He lived as a wondrous sacrifice. And that's what our second verse begins to teach us in this psalm. Is that He came as a wondrous sacrifice. I kind of remember hearing a story about a little boy who went into a pet store and he saw a big bin of all these little puppies, and he spent about 15 minutes over there playing with all the puppies, and the shopkeeper was kind of keeping an eye on him. And then when the boy finally got up out of it, walked over to he says, "How much are the puppies?" And he gave him the amount. The boy says, "I'll be back in a couple of days to get the puppy." And as he was walking out, the shopkeeper said, hey, wait a second. Puppies go pretty quick, man. You're going to have to work fast to get the money. He said, "Don't worry. I'm coming back to get my puppy." The boy already knew which one he wanted. So he goes off, and about 3 days later, he comes back, and he's got a wad of cash. Said that he was delivering newspapers and mowing yards and raking leaves and doing all the stuff that he could to make a couple of dollars. And he sets it down, and to the penny, as the store owner's counting it out, he says, "Go get your puppy." And as the boy walks over and he pulls out the puppy, the shopkeeper realizes he grabs the dog that had a limp leg. And he says, "Wait a minute, son, wait. That dog's never going to be able to play with you. That dog's never going to be able to fetch. He'll be lucky if he's even able to walk." He says, "Put him back and go get one of the healthier dogs." And the little boy, without missing a beat, turns to the shopkeeper and says, "I know exactly which dog I picked." And as he's walking out the door, the shopkeeper realizes that on his legs he sees a pair of braces. The boy knew the dog that he was getting. You think Jesus knew the people He was getting? Jesus took on our form, became like us, walked around as a man among us, that He may experience this life, so that He would fully know and understand the temptations that we would face, the trials that we do, the hopes, the fears, the disgusts, whatever you want to put in there. He did it so that He would live the very same life that we would live, that He could prove to us that you can live a sinless life. To prove to us that you can love God above everything else and love your fellow man as yourselves. He did it to prove to us that He understood when He taught us how to love. He understood how difficult it was for us to love at that level. But yet He came in the form of man. It would have been real easy for Him just to show up in His God form. Amen? Show up in a God form, big bright light. Everybody goes, "Ooh, there's Jesus. I'm scared." He didn't want us to be afraid. If you look at it, He wanted us to love. He wanted us to love God and love one another. But everywhere in the Bible where you see God show up, there's this bright light, people are what? Afraid. You ever seen the guy on the street corner? "Hell is coming, repent," and people go and get saved out of fear. There's a funny thing about fear. After a while, fear wears off, doesn't it? Anybody afraid of the dark when he was growing up? Okay, good. I'm glad some of y'all can be honest with me. I was petrified of it. There was every demon, every dragon, every preacher in the dark, man, I was petrified of the dark. But as I got older, I no longer feared the dark. Well, there's something to be said about coming to Christ through fear. That after a while, you begin to go, I don't fear Him anymore. But if you come to somebody in love, man, that's lasting, ain't it? Fear will wear off, but love will endure everything. That's why God says, love one another as you love yourselves. Love me above everything else. He didn't say, fear me, did he? It'd been real easy to say, fear me. But He said, love me above everything else. Now, if you look at the Old Testament, man, there's a lot of people writing about fear, isn't there? Well, God had to knock a couple of heads together. We're knuckleheads, right? We don't always get it right. Sometimes, as His children, we've got to be disciplined. Amen? But He sent His Son to show us what this love really, truly was like. What it really, truly was all about. So when it says silent night, holy night. Holy. You remember our working definition of holy? Set aside for God. That's what holy is. The Holy Bible, the book, the basic instruction before leaving earth, the set aside how to live this life book. That night was set aside for God's purpose. I'm sure there were other kids born that night, amen? I'm sure somewhere in the world there were other kids born, but that night was set aside for His Son to come and be made flesh, that He might live the same life that we live each and every day. Gloria Gaither kind of put it this way, and I thought this was beautiful and wonderful. She says, right from the beginning, God's love has reached, and from the beginning, man has refused to understand. But love went on reaching. It went on offering itself. And still today, after 2,000 years, patiently, lovingly, Christ is reaching out to us today. He is reaching, longing to share with us the very being of God. His love still is longing. His love still is reaching right past the shackles of my mind, the doubts of my heart. And the Word of the Father became Mary's little son. And His love reached all the way to where I am today. His love will reach you exactly where you're at. Which brings us to that third verse. His was a world-changing sacrifice. Nobody else in history has made such a sacrifice that encapsulated all of the world. I don't care who you are. No other human being has made a sacrifice so great that affected so many. Yeah, somebody might make a sacrifice that affects the people within maybe a 20-mile radius of them, or 6 degrees of separation, however you want to call it. But Jesus made a sacrifice that 2,000 years later is still making a difference in the world. 2,000 years. And He came as a baby. Came as the Holy Son to a pair of peasant parents. Came in the most unnoteworthy way, being born in a manger. The birth of Christ marked the beginning of the work of God in mankind's life. The work of salvation, which is eternal and forever and can never be robbed from us, can never be taken for us. But the scary thing about salvation is we can give it up. We can say, I no longer want to live into this. And that's scary to me, that people can walk away from their salvation once they've known who God is. And my fear is that they only knew God from the fear perspective and not from a love perspective. They only knew God as a God that I needed